All process has been entered in the Patel case.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, everyone. That'll complete the hearing on Patel.
With the flick of a pen, all charges against a man who was accused of trying to kidnap a little boy in an Atlanta area Walmart were dropped. And it comes after store surveillance arguably contradicted what the boy's mother told police. His attorney and her investigator are here to talk about the case, what happened in court, and what we can expect next. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. This is a case that we've been following quite closely here on Sidebar since March. With 57-year-old McGeough Patel, he was arrested by police in Acworth, Georgia, after a woman told a Walmart store employee to call 911. Caroline Miller claimed that a man had tried to snatch her toddler away from her and take off. She called it a, quote, tug of war. Now, Patel, who had apparently left the store with the Tylenol that he had come in search of, was arrested by Cobb County Police. They originally charged him with kidnapping, but a grand jury ended up indicting him on charges of criminal attempt to commit kidnapping, simple assault, and simple battery. But when surveillance video from inside that Walmart store was released to the public by Patel's attorney, Ashley Merchant, there was outrage. The video arguably completely disproved the allegations that Miller made. Now, we're going to be speaking with Ms. Merchant as well as her investigator in just a minute about how she was able to get justice for Mr. Patel. But first, I want to walk you through this video. Okay, so you flash back to March 18, 2025, and according to Merchant, Patel was on the hunt for some Tylenol, and it had to be a specific version of the brand. At around 8:16 p.m. that night, security video shows McGeough Patel enter the Walmart. He wanders around the aisles in the pharmacy section, presumably looking for the Tylenol, but he can't seem to spot it. Who he does spot is Caroline Miller, who's apparently riding in one of the store's motorized scooters with one child in her lap and the other at her feet. Now, Miller has since admitted that she's not disabled, doesn't need the scooter, but her children like to ride in it. So Patel says that he asked Miller where the medicine was. And as they turn into an aisle, that is when something happens. But the angle obscures the interaction. But Miller claims Patel tried to grab her son. But the footage doesn't seem to show a struggle. Patel claims he was trying to prevent her son from falling off the scooter. He eventually finds the Tylenol, walks calmly to the checkout, even indicating to Miller that he got what he was looking for, and she gives him a thumbs up. He checks out at the register, pays with his debit card, pauses to chat with the employee before exiting the store. Nothing that might suggest he was fleeing the scene, as had been suggested by Miller. And several minutes into the interaction, Miller approaches an employee, tells her someone tried to take her child. The employee says they need to call police, something the employee would reportedly later say that Miller was hesitant to do. She also did interviews with local TV stations, apparently, saying she was lucky to have saved her son from a kidnapping. But once the video was out there was a good bit of uproar, with many calling for Acworth and Cobb County authorities to not only release Patel on bond so he could get out of jail, but also to drop the charges. Now, not to jump away from this in any way or make light of the allegations here, but, talking shopping, I got to talk about Upside, our sponsor. Why? This is incredible. It's a free app that gets you cash back when you buy daily essentials. So if I pump my gas, I can use Upside. I go out to lunch, I can use Upside. Maybe I get something at a convenience store, I can use Upside. And why not get cash back when I do all these things, right? This is real, actual cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. So once you have the free Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app, you get paid. So to find out how much you can earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. But make sure to use our promo code Sidebar because you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. And in May, after 45 days behind bars, Mr. Patel was granted bond by Judge Gregory Poole. Hundreds of people had come to the courthouse to support him. And during that hearing, Merchant argued that her team spoke with at least 2 people who had been in the store who said if they'd seen an attempted baby snatching, they would have stepped in.
There's 2 alleged witnesses, the Walmart employee and Mr. Leyva. Mr. Leyva is mentioned on the warrant. Both of them, we've interviewed them. Both of them had said if they'd seen a kidnapping, an assault, an attempt, anything like that, they would have stepped in, that they were there, didn't see it. They all confirmed the Walmart was busy. There were lots of people around. The Walmart employee said that Mr. Patel was a friendly older gentleman, was very friendly with her, kind of gave her like a hug almost, like she was so happy when she finally helped him find the Tylenol. She said that she didn't know what was going on with Miss Miller, but she's not permitted to ask what her handicap is, but she said it was suspicious that she didn't scream, call 911, anything like that. And then Mr. Leyva, the gentleman in the orange shirt that you saw, again, he said that Mr. Patel lifted the child like the child's father, and that Miss Miller sort of pulled back the child. There was no tug of war. Mr. Leyva actually was mistaken and thought it was the younger child that all this was happening with. He was kind of confused. But the one thing he was sure about was that there was no attempted abduction. And had he seen anything like that, he was close enough that he would have stepped in and done something.
But according to prosecutors, when Patel was arrested, he allegedly admitted he touched the child, which could technically meet the standard for attempted kidnapping under the law. But here's what happened. Patel posted bond. He was released. But Cobb County, they still didn't drop the charges until now. A quick hearing was held once again in front of Judge Poole on August 6th to approve a state's motion not to prosecute.
The court will call for consideration that matter concerning the state of Georgia versus Mahendra Patel, case number 25CR01090. The record can reflect the matter was set by the court on the state's motion pursuant to OCGA section 17-8-3. The record can reflect that Mr. and Ms. Merchant are here representing his interest. Do you waive his presence?
He's
or is he
actually
here?
present in the courtroom with his family.
He's here someplace?
Yes, he is. Thank you, Judge.
All right. And Ms. McCauley's representing the interest of the state. She's the one that filed the motion. And I've read the state's bench brief and the motion, and I'm ready.
Thank you, Judge. I'm not going to be overly repetitive of what is already provided in the state's motion, which was filed this morning. The state is making a motion pursuant to 17.8.3 of the official code of Georgia for an entry of null pros as to the following. The district attorney's office for the Cobb Judicial Circuit and Mr. Patel, along with his counsel, Caroline Miller, on her own behalf and on behalf of the minor child, consistent with her election under 1717(1) at SEC, met to discuss their respective views of the above captioned case. That was done on Monday of this week. That election was done after a thorough review of all available facts and circumstances, evaluation of the best interests of the community and goals of the criminal justice system. After both that review and the parties' discussion of their respective positions, the state is satisfied at this point that the ends of justice have been met, and we would move for an entry of null pros.
Merchant?
We have no objection, Judge. Thank you.
All right. I believe it's in the court's discretion, and obviously that's fine with me, knowing what I've seen in the matter. I appreciate the state looking into it. You've complied with the Victims Notification Act by speaking with the alleged victim in the case.
Yes.
And I'm satisfied. If you present the null pros, I will sign it.
Thank you, Judge.
Null pros has been entered in the Patel case.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, everyone. That'll complete the hearing on Patel.
And that was it. The whole court appearance lasted less than 3 minutes, and Mr. Patel was a free man. He spoke with Atlanta news outlet 11 Live after the hearing, saying, "I feel relieved, to be honest with you. This thing was hanging on my head for a long time, and our family went through a lot of hell. You know, we went through this, but today is a day of celebration, and I'm thankful that I'm out." Okay, so we wanted to get a behind-the-scenes look at this investigation into Miller's claims, the push to find out what really happened, also this case just being thrown out. So to do that, I am pleased to welcome back here on Sidebar Patel's defense attorney, Ashley Merchant, as well as her investigator, Charles Middlestat. Thank you both so much for coming on. Congratulations. This is a huge win. I mean, Ashley, last time you and I spoke, I got to say, what you were telling me about the surveillance footage and what it shows, I'm not surprised by this outcome. I mean, it took a little while. Obviously, Mr. Patel was saying how he and his family went through hell for this to actually get to this resolution. How is he feeling right now? What kind of impact has this had on him and his family?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jesse. He is just thrilled right now. But, we had him sort of put together a statement about how it impacted his family, and reading it just really upset me, because he's got two very successful, wonderful daughters. He's got a very close family. He cares for his mother. His wife cares for her mother, and just the impact on all of them. I don't think people realize how impactful it is when someone is taken from their lives for 40-something days without warning, and how it impacted all those other people. He's He's got such a wonderful outlook about everything. He's so much more positive than I am. He's like, oh, the system worked, I'm free. And I'm like, no, the system failed you. You were in jail for almost, 2 months. But he is much more positive than I think most people would be under this circumstance. But he's very happy that it's finally behind him, at least the criminal charges, and that he can close that chapter.
That's incredible. That's an incredible outlook on life. Now, Charles, before I get to your role in this investigation, Ashley, you got to explain to me what happened behind the scenes. So prosecutors said they dropped the charges because they were, quote, satisfied that the ends of justice have been met. What does that mean?
Basically, it means this was a mistake. That Mr. Patel is not a kidnapper or a predator, not a fear, to reoffend, to do anything in the community, and that they just decided not to prosecute the case. We filed a speedy trial demand, so I think that was instrumental in getting this result, because oftentimes cases take years in the criminal justice system. We had, in Georgia, we've got a statutory speedy trial demand statute, and so we have to file it within a certain amount of time. We filed it in June, and it was set for trial in a week. It was set for trial August 18th. So that sort of sped up the wheels of justice, but they're saying that they think that this is the just result, and we think it's the right result. I mean, we think it definitely should have been dismissed, and we're glad that it was done quickly.
Again, Charles, I'll get to you 1 second. I have to ask one follow-up here, Ashley.
Yeah,
I'm confused. Were they fighting your argument? Were they saying, I know Ms. Merchant is saying that the footage exonerates her client. We disagree. We think the footage says something else. I'm not sure where the 180 came from, because, again, when you and I spoke, and I don't remember how long ago that was, I was curious whether the next week it might get dismissed. What? Were they fighting it?
Yeah, I think that was May. That was right after Mr.
Yeah, it was. I think it was May. Yeah,
it was May. I agree. I mean, it should have been dismissed back in May. I think it should have been dismissed in March when he was arrested, or never happened.
Or never been indicted.
Yeah, exactly, Charles. It never should have been indicted. And that's the travesty here. Why did it take so long? That's a good question, because there was no new evidence. Everything was known at the time that it was indicted. It shouldn't have gone this far. It definitely shouldn't have gone this far.
Yeah.
So what transpired, our willingness to go to trial, them not wanting to go to trial, I think that might have been, a little bit different. But what I think is really interesting to your question is, if you go back and you look at the bond hearing, they were fighting and saying Mr. Patel shouldn't even get a bond, that he was this huge danger and this, predator and all this stuff. And then there was a 180. So, and that prosecutor who was at the bond hearing making those arguments was nowhere to be seen yesterday in court. So I don't know if maybe cooler heads prevailed. I also think it's interesting that prosecutor who was in court at the bond hearing, a lot of folks watched that bond hearing. He used to be the chief of police at Ackworth Police, which that's the jurisdiction that made this arrest. So, we wonder if that played into it, because he's protecting his officers. I mean, these are his officers. He was their chief, and if maybe that was the push, and then cooler heads were able to look at the case and say, I don't think so.
Let's put that on pause, because I have a follow-up question. I want to go to Charles now. So, Charles, what was your role in this investigation and in this case? And I will also ask you, what surprised you the most during the course of your investigation?
So, in a case like this, Jesse, the first thing we want to do is hit the ground as quickly as we can. And so, first, it was deploying and triggering an investigation into Miss Miller. Again, the credibility here was, her credibility was very much at issue. Of course, we knew just from the video surveillance footage that just on its face, if you looked just at with the way that law enforcement sort of focused on the interaction that they claimed was depicting criminal intent and attempted abduction. It obviously was very ambiguous, but as you sort of pull out, almost like focusing a lens, and then as you pull out and look at the bigger picture, you start to see that Mr. Patel's actions were completely inconsistent with someone who just was involved in a failed attempted abduction. And so, we also saw immediately that there was a direct witness there. There was the witness in the immediate proximity of this who was looking and, in fact, engaged with Miss Miller. And so initially trying to identify the witnesses, because we, as you know, in cases, Jesse, we get these redacted incident reports that provide little to nothing until we actually get discovery. And that's by the time you get discovery, it's too late. That means the case has been indicted and the train is already way down the tracks. And so we were able to identify all of the witnesses by reaching out to Walmart, by looking at social media, et cetera, and also triggering an investigation into Miss Miller herself. And so those were sort of the initial steps. And it was obvious that law enforcement had really had this tunnel vision immediately, and that had they pulled the lens out and looked at this in a much more objective fashion, they would have seen that Mr. Patel's actions were completely inconsistent. In fact, that he and Miss Miller had 2 other encounters subsequent to the alleged abduction, and that, in fact, she engaged him and he showed her, hey, I found, these pills that I was looking for. And that it's clear that the direct witness, who was literally just within feet of this event, clearly was not alarmed. This was inconsistent with someone who would have just witnessed an attempted abduction. And that while law enforcement had presumably spoken to that individual, they whatever interview they did was far from what I would consider to be forensic in nature. It certainly wasn't probing. It certainly was not objective. Because had it been, they would have learned what we learned from that witness, and that witness did not believe that he had seen an attempted abduction. In fact, there was nothing alarming about what he had witnessed. And so it's sad because this is a case of a good Samaritan who has been penalized severely. And really, this should be a cautionary tale for law enforcement to really be very, very judicious in terms of obviously very serious allegation. I mean, these things happen and they are to be taken very seriously. But on its face, that video was somewhat ambiguous. There's no audio. You can't tell what occurred. It's kind of grainy. And so it's not something that you should rush to judgment on, particularly given Mr. Patel's actions, paying with his own credit card. He's in the store for quite some time thereafter. He engages with a Walmart greeter on the way out, and he's the one who initiates that engagement. These are not the actions of an individual who has been involved in a failed attempted abduction.
And Charles, just to follow up, what did you learn during your investigation of Miss Miller that provided context into this case?
Well, I want to be careful about how you sort of characterize that. We learned a lot. Let me suffice it to say, we learned a lot. There's a lot of documentation out there. There's a lot of public records that exist with regard to Ms. Miller's interactions with law enforcement historically, and obviously they're available to everybody. They are public records. And so from a law enforcement perspective, you should immediately understand that she has had a lot of interactions with law enforcement, that she understands sort of how this works, how the criminal justice system works, what it's like to make a report, what the consequences are of making a report, the importance of being truthful and accurate in the reporting. And so, I think the reporting would speak for itself, and it would have spoken for itself had this case gone forward. I think it would have become pretty significant. Yeah,
you could summarize that sort of, and Charles and I talked about this. She was quick to call the police. She was real fast to call the police, and so I think that might have played into this case.
Have Mr. Patel and Miss Miller spoken at all since this happened, since the resolution of this case? Any communication whatsoever?
Well, so in Georgia, we have what's called Marcy's Law, and that is a law that a lot of states have that say that we are not allowed to contact the alleged victim, whether they're an alleged victim. There's no way to determine if you're actually truly a victim. And so because of that, we weren't able to contact. Although, and I think this was referenced in court yesterday, we did have a meeting on Monday where everybody appeared on video. We can't really talk about any of the things that were said during that because it's sort of a pretrial discussion. But it was a time, even though it's not face-to-face in person, face-to-face on video at least, to meet everyone. So that was organized and that was done. Okay,
let me ask you this. Has Miller in any way said, I was wrong? I thought something, I'm seeing this now, I was wrong about my perception about what happened?
There's not been any statements like that. Our impression of what just talking with everyone involved was that this was just a rush to judgment on the part of, Miller, the police, but mostly the police. What's been interesting, mostly a rush to judgment on the police. I think everybody assumes that when you call the police, they're going to investigate. And Charles said earlier, they have tunnel vision. That's the problem. Yeah. You have tunnel vision. This could have easily been looked at a different way. And it's, and there's a couple things I can point out. If the police had looked at Mr. Patel's phone, which he freely gave to them, they would have seen that he was texting with his daughter, who's a medical student who helped care for his elderly mother, and she was sending a picture of the Tylenol, that he is clearly looking for a specific type of Tylenol. That would have been very informative. If they had seen that, they would have seen. If they had called any family members, they would have known he cares for his elderly mother. She has osteoarthritis, and she takes a specific type of Tylenol. That's very reasonable. And so these are just little things that the police could have done to have corroborated innocence.
Charles, did you have conversations with law enforcement?
No, and honestly, it just wasn't even necessary. We had so much to work with. Jesse, it was just sort of puzzling that this even got to this point, because just based on the evidence that we had, and thank God for digital evidence, right? I mean, we feel like our privacy is invaded on the daily, all day. But in circumstances like this, thank goodness Walmart has, an extensive video surveillance system within their stores, and that we had sufficient evidence to be able to show the various phases of Mr. Patel's movement throughout the store. We would have been able to present the fact that he used his credit card. You can actually see him at the checkout using a credit card. We got to see that he was engaged with the shopper. You can see the 3 different interactions that he had with Miss Miller, where he literally shows her, "Hey, I found the pills," and her pointing. I think they're in that direction. And then he walks right back by her. There's so many instances where the context of his interactions with her and his time in Walmart becomes so significant. Had law enforcement taken the time to look at that, what Ashley says is 1,000% right, but I don't even think they even had to get to the point of looking at, doing a Celebrite dump on his phone to realize, this is a guy who literally went in there for one purpose and one purpose only, which was to find some Tylenol for his mother. And that was his mission. And that he interacted with, in fact, at some point, he interacted with a Walmart clerk who literally walked him to the pills, to the Tylenol. And so there's nothing that he did. There's no evidence that he was loitering around the store looking for targets of an abduction. Nothing. There's nothing that would be remotely consistent with law enforcement's theory that they ultimately bought into, that this is what that was. And rather, it was just a very, very spontaneous event where he was being a good Samaritan, and he was trying to protect a child who he thought was fallen, who was being driven around, by the way, by a mother in a cart that is reserved, really is designed to be accessible for the disabled, not for someone who wants to, ride around with 2 children.
But before we wrap things up, Ashley, just jumping on something that you said at the beginning, you basically said that Mr. Patel has finished the criminal case, right? The criminal case is put behind him. What about the civil case? Is he considering taking any sort of civil action, any sort of legal action, and who would that be against?
Well, we always keep all of our options open. How we operate is we always want to resolve a criminal case completely and successfully, and we don't want to cloud our judgment on a criminal case with the thoughts of a civil case, because that's very difficult. But there are a lot of actors here that things that were wrong and took significant liberties that caused harm to Mr. Patel. So, we're always going to evaluate those options. We don't have any concrete plans, I can tell you at this point, but we are not leaving Mr. Patel. We've all become very good friends with Mr. Patel and his entire family. He's a great guy. And so, we're going to keep all those options open.
Ashley Merchant, Charles Middlestat, thank you both so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Great to see you.
That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.